Hello. A lot of us have a lot of questions about how to eat right. And over the past several months now, because of my own health conditions, I have been doing a lot of research about this, trying to understand, trying to sort through fact and fiction. Because let's be honest, there are people out there, some who are experts and some who are not, who are telling us lies. There are people who are standing up to huge audiences of people and saying, this is the truth, when they're silently being paid by the food and beverage industries and other industries that benefit from our suffering. So it took me a while, and I still don't have 100% understanding, possibly because I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not a doctor. Now, let's differentiate. Doctors are given very little training by default in nutrition. Nutritionists and dietitians are not doctors. So, I'm neither of those. I'm just a guy who thinks I'm kind of smart, and I've done enough research that I have been able to learn how to improve health. And I want to share that information with you. The first thing I want to tell you is that when you buy something from the store, something that is a prepared food, especially if it's something you can heat up in plastic or was packaged in plastic and heated after the package was closed to kill any microbiotic things like viruses and bacteria and parasites, that food is not good for you. Okay? So store-bought prepared foods are the worst choice. If you're going to go to the store, walk around the edges. Fresh produce, fresh meat, and so on. Skip as much of the processed stuff as you can. Restaurant food is better than store-bought food depending on a couple of things. Number one, the recipes that they're using and the way they cook their food. If their food is high in oil, for example, they use high temperatures, though that's bad. If they use lots of salt and lots of sugar, that's even worse. So high temperatures introduce carcinogens into food, especially like meat. And lots of oil provides lots of calories. Now, and of course, sugar produces lots of calories and can be bad for our body in multiple ways, including affecting the liver in ways that are very, very similar to alcohol. So the best way to cook or to eat is to eat homemade food using good recipes. And therein lies a challenge because it's hard to know what a good recipe is. But basically, the less processing, the less high temperatures, the less oil, sugar, and salt, the better. Now, obviously, you ideally, number one, don't cook everything together with like pasta or rice or something, because the pasta or rice, if it's mixed into like the casserole or whatever, is going to make it so that you're going to have to add more salt and more spices just to compensate, because those things absorb flavor. They reduce the quality of the flavor you experience. So it's better to cook them separately, and then even then, don't use as much salt as you think you should, and just let people add more according to their needs or desires. Okay? And again, don't rely on store-bought things that are pre-cooked or pre-processed, because the more that's done, the more it introduces things into your body that are probably not going to help you and are probably going to cause things like heart disease and cancer, diabetes, urticaria, gout, lupus, and so many other diseases that are caused by incorrect diet. Okay, so now please keep in mind again, if you have a high temperature and you're cooking meat, it does two things. High temperature cooking of meat introduces lots of carcinogens into the meat, especially if it's a processed meat. And second of all, it also introduces additional trans fats into the meat. Now, if the meat is cooked in oil as well, then the oil will also have trans fats created by that temperature as it is cooking. If they choose to use a refined oil instead of a virgin oil, you're going to get the trans fats that were already in the oil, plus you're going to get the trans fats added by the high temperature. And of course, no matter whether it's a refined oil or a virgin oil, you're going to get lots and lots of calories between the meat and the oil. Now, also keep in mind that ideally you should be reducing your intake of meat to about once a week, and you should be reducing or eliminating dairy from your diet and reducing your eggs to one or two eggs per week. They are not things that are good for you. Processed meats are a type 1 carcinogen. That means they're at the same level of risk for causing cancer as plutonium, which is insane if you think about it. Now, setting all that aside, let's talk about from a whole food to an ultra-processed food. How can we differentiate? It's not exactly easy, except for when you think about a whole food and a really highly processed food. So this is a whole food. If you haven't noticed, it's a slightly wrinkly apple, but it's still good. And this food, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, as they say. And apples are actually good for you. They can actually reduce an asthma attack if you consume one within a reasonable amount of time after you notice the symptoms. I know because I've done that myself. When I was getting myself off of a steroid that I had been prescribed, I stopped taking the steroid and I started having asthma problems, and this apple's helped. So this is a whole food. Whole foods are completely unprocessed. They're the best thing to eat. The next step down from that would be a sliced up whole food like this. This is not as good as a whole food because they may have removed parts of the food that are actually good for you, and they may, as with this, have introduced things like preservatives that, like for example, this one has calcium ascorbate, which stops the oxidation that turns an apple brown. But as a consequence, part of the apple gets thrown away, wasted, because there's, you only can get so much from machine cutting an apple. So that's better than nothing, but it's not as good as a whole apple. Now, what's worse than that? Well, this is still very good, but unsweetened applesauce. Unsweetened applesauce basically is the, I guess you could say, semi-liquid form of an apple. It's been chopped up into small pieces, but it still contains at least the inside of the apple, if not the skin. Ideally with the skin, which is better because there are vitamins and minerals in the skin that are not so much in the body of the fruit itself. But unsweetened. One step down from that would be sweetened applesauce. Sweetened applesauce is going to have a lot of calories and a lot of extra sugar. Around the same level as sweetened applesauce would be non-concentrated, unsweetened apple juice. Now, they're about the same because sweetened applesauce has too many calories and too much sugar, but it has fiber. So that kind of offsets some of the carbohydrates from the sugar. Non-concentrated, unsweetened applesauce doesn't have much, if any, fiber in it. However, it also doesn't have a huge amount of carbohydrates or sugar that is in the concentrated or sweetened types of apple juice. A step below that would be concentrated but unsweetened applesauce. Not too much worse, but it's worse. And a step below that would be concentrated sweetened applesauce, apple juice. Because not only are you getting the concentrated amounts of sugar from the juice itself, you're getting excess sugar that was added, table sugar or honey or cane sugar or molasses or whatever. And that means bad news. One step below that would be apple jelly. You're going to get all the calories and carbs of those juices and the sweetened applesauce, but you're also going to be getting potentially preservatives and other chemicals, in addition to which you're going to be getting other substances that unless it's freshly made, you probably are better off not eating, because apple jelly is a relatively highly processed product, although it's not high. Now, one step below that would be a highly processed product like apple jelly and peanut butter in a sandwich form on a whole wheat bread. So you're getting some good stuff from the peanut butter, like protein. You're getting some fiber from the whole wheat bread. You're getting carbs, of course, from all three of those things. But you're getting a lot of carbs in the form of the sugars that are in the apple jelly. And that'll only be cut by the amount of fiber that's in the whole wheat bread, which varies from brand to brand. So that's not so great. The next step down from that would be if you had the same product, but it had added sugar in it. That's much worse. Anytime you add sugar, you're making a product much worse for your health in terms of calories and in terms of carbohydrates, especially if you take that one step further down and you remove the whole wheat bread and eat white bread. White bread is horrible for your health, just as white sugar is horrible for your health. One step down from that would be something like an apple pie cereal bar. Now, this is a fairly simple one. It's only got 7 ingredients, no added sugars, and it actually has 4 grams of fiber out of the total 24 grams of carbs. So there are net 20 grams of carbs, of which half are, 18 grams, are from sugars that are from the dates and apples and stuff. Raisins as well. So this is worse than all of those things, but this would be better than a different brand of apple cereal bars or apple pie bars or whatever that are a lot more processed than that, have a lot more ingredients, have a bunch of chemicals in it and stuff like that. And they can try to offset some of that by adding fiber to it, like through oatmeal or something like that. Also adding vitamins and minerals. You could add that to enrich it and stuff like that, which kind of will offset even further the negative aspects of that. And next step down from that would be something like an apple pie or any product where it's a complete mixture of a whole bunch of different things that has been packaged and sold at the store. That is the absolute worst for you. That's the kind of stuff that, without any doubt whatsoever, is going to kill you slowly. It's going to lead to metabolic syndrome, it's going to lead to gout, it's going to lead to heart disease and stroke and diabetes and all kinds of stuff. So, again, stay away from processed foods, especially those processed meats and so on. Now, that does include vegan and vegetarian processed foods. Just because they say vegan or vegetarian does not mean that makes it a healthful processed foods. The more processing there is, the more extraction of like protein from soy or peas or whatever, and these partial components from a whole food, the more you put all those things in, and the oils and the sugars and the salts and the extracts and stuff like that, the worse it's going to be for your health. So I hope you understand that. Also, again, try to limit or eliminate your dairy and eggs. Now, I'm going to pause for just a second there to explain that this is not actually only about your health or the health of the people you love. It is also about the animals. If you saw the videos that I'd seen, you might reconsider eating anything that comes from animals, because some of the ways that animals are treated on some farms and ranches is absolutely abhorrent. It's completely disrespectful to the animals, and they suffer immensely, and that has a long-term impact on you, because that introduces stress hormones and antibiotics and other things, unnatural things or unhealthful things like pus and dairy milk, and cheese and ice cream and stuff that you don't need in your body, and it's not good for your body. So, and dairy has been demonstrated to not only not be protective, but it has been closely linked, along with sugar, of course, to diabetes and heart attacks and strokes and stuff. And eggs, because they're high in cholesterol, despite the limited health benefits they may have, If you're eating the egg yolks, you're not helping yourself. That's not good for you. All right, now I want to carry on to kind of like more basic components and talk more about these things. So I'm going to start with sugar. Now, there are multiple kinds of sugar, but we're going to boil it down to the basic kinds. From dairy, you get lactose. A lot of people have a problem with eating lactose and don't even know it. People from certain groups or from some countries where it's not common to eat dairy foods, like in Asia and Africa, in some parts of South America, will have very high, if not 100%, lactose intolerance, because we're not designed to consume milk or other dairy products after we're weaned from our mother's milk. Okay? And that can lead to gas and a bloated stomach and even diarrhea. And this can, over a long period of time, result in other health problems like IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis, and so on. The basic sugars that we tend to eat way too much of, even if we're not eating dairy, are glucose and fructose. Now, glucose gets converted into something called glucogen, which is stored in places like skeletal muscles and certain other places, and it's used in the bloodstream if there's immediate need. It also can be, it's stored if it can't be used in the form of fat. Fructose, on the other hand, is stored in your adipose tissues, your fat tissues, and it's also stored in your liver. And in fact, the body doesn't really have a great way of knowing the difference between consuming alcohol and consuming fructose, because both of them lead to fatty liver and then to cirrhosis of the liver, just as alcoholics tend to experience. The only big difference that I can think of is that alcohol, if you consume too much of it, damages your brains. Sugar may damage your brains too, but in a different way. Sugar also damages your mitochondria, which are the powerhouses of your cells. So you want to try to limit your sugar, added sugars, brown, in any of the sugars. It doesn't matter if it's syrups or honeys or agave or white or brown or whatever it is. You want to try to limit it to less than 7 grams of sugar a day, especially for kids. We are seeing an epidemic of diabetes because children are being given so many processed foods that are high in sugar and high in calories that we're destroying their bodies before they can even grow up. The next thing I want to talk about is calories. Now, a big source of calories that people aren't aware of, as I mentioned earlier, is oils. You get a huge amount of oils, and if you're consuming refined oils, it doesn't matter what kind, you're also getting some trans fats, because the heat process and certain other processes of refining the oils may benefit in some ways, but it destroys some of the nutrients. In addition, it adds some trans fats. Unrefined oils or virgin oils, like especially olive oil and canola oil, are really, really good for you, but any of them, especially like palm oils, including coconut oil and corn oil and soy oil, are not good for you. Now, you may say, well, but the Heart Association says use corn and soy. Well, I'm going to explain why I don't recommend it. Because our diets are already hyper rich in corn and soy. So adding excess amounts of corn and soy through oil is a bad idea. You should ideally be looking at, in terms of calories, less than or equal to 2,000 calories per day. And you may discover, if you look at the things you're eating, like this Uncrustables has 600 calories. It has 530 milligrams of sodium, which is about 1/5 of your daily recommended allowance. And it has 64 grams of carbs. Well, I'm sorry, 57 when you subtract the fiber, of which almost or over half of that, at 30 grams, is sugars, 26 of which are added sugars. That's a huge amount that's a huge hit from just one sandwich that doesn't even have high fructose corn syrup, which high fructose corn syrup is like the big no-no, because that's got more fructose in it, or fructose, as than most other sources of sugar, and that goes to your liver and damages it unless fructose is in minor quantities or you're getting it from a whole food like an apple. Actually, eating whole fruits is really very good for you. It can help reduce the problems with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and other diseases. This has been demonstrated through multiple studies. All right, next. Okay, so as you can see, the calories and the amount of sugar are huge. And I mentioned that's the salt, which is the next thing on my list. You should be consuming no more than 2.3 grams or 2,300 grams of salt. 2,300 milligrams of salt per day. Salt is a necessary part of our diet. We have to get it. But when we get it in large amounts, it starts damaging our bodies. In fact, you can get so much salt, like your soda, for example, that you can actually dehydrate yourself and cause yourself to get ill. Salt contributes to hypertension and various other problems. So keep your salt consumption low. If you want to help yourself, I suggest using MSG. MSG has far less sodium in it than salt. So compare here. This salt has 590 milligrams per quarter teaspoon. And this MSG has 120 milligrams per quarter teaspoon. 590 versus 120. And that's just a quarter teaspoon. Or if you want to really cut out the sodium in your diet, you can get something like this, no salt, which instead of using sodium uses potassium. Okay. So, and I know you're saying, but MSG is really bad for you. No, actually, unless you have problems with migraines or you notice an increased sensitivity to pain after you consume MSG, unless you're consuming huge quantities of it, and there is a YouTuber online that does, you're fine. The very few people actually have a sensitivity to MSG. Okay, now, the next one that I've mentioned already a couple of times is oils. Now, please remember, the unrefined oils, or virgin oils especially, olive oil, which has kind of a funny taste, and canola oil are some of the best oils out there for you. Some of the others that are recommended are corn and soy and peanut and a couple of others, walnut oil, but some of these, sesame oil, sesame and walnut oil tend to have a strong taste. You could use chia oil, that also has a strong taste, and there are some others. But once you refine it through heat and or chemicals, you're introducing chemicals and other impurities like trans fats into the oil. Also, oils again have a huge amount of calories in them. So, another one that you can use is avocado oil. Now, some of these oils are expensive, especially when they're in the virgin form, but it is a good idea. Now, it is important not to heat up oils, especially any oil, to the point that it starts to smoke. If you get it to the point where it's starting to smoke, you have ruined that oil. It's already increasing in trans fats. You need to toss it out and start over again. Now, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the caloric intake of oils, and this includes if you get it as a vinaigrette or whatever. So I've got avocado oil here. It does not say that this is virgin. It says it's pure, but it doesn't say it's virgin. So it is expeller pressed, which would technically, as long as they didn't use heat, be virgin avocado oil. But 1 tablespoon, just 1 tablespoon of this has 130 calories. Now I've got extra virgin olive oil, which is also expeller pressed, and this has got per tablespoon 120 calories in it. So as you can see, just a small amount of oil is going to give you an awful lot of calories, and that's not good for you. Yes, we need calories, but too many calories actually shortens your life and increases your risk of a lot of different kinds of diseases. Okay? And so when you see chefs on a show and they pour in like a half cup, a cup of oil into their recipe saying, oh, use a tablespoon. Use a tablespoon. Don't do what they show you. Do what the 1 tablespoon limit. Keep it low, okay? And just stir it up extra well. Now, I do want to point out that palm oils, coconut oils, are often referred to, and I mean the refined ones, not the virgin ones, which are hard to find. I don't think I haven't looked for them recently, but I haven't seen any virgin coconut or palm oil. But if it's virgin or coconut palm oil, the risk of it is it's high in saturated fats. If it's refined, it's also going to have trans fats in it. Now, why is it that some people like palm and coconut? It's because it has been created most often using heat. So it is very heat resistant. It doesn't start smoking at as low of a temperature as a lot of other oils. The thicker it is, the more it solidifies at room temperature, the worse it is for your health, because the higher there are the amount of saturated fats in there. Now, if you want to rub it on your skin, or you want to rub shea butter on your skin, which is another kind of oil, that stuff is great. It gets rid of wrinkles, and it doesn't matter whether it's from East Africa or West Africa, as long as it hasn't been adulterated or cut with other things to thicken it, which raises the melting point, and you may not get it to melt on your skin, and that makes a big mess. Okay, so, but if you're looking at oils, stay away from the palm oil and the coconut oil and anything else that it has been heavily refined like that. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is fats. So we've gotten through the carbohydrates, at least in part. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Fats, you want to try to stick to foods that don't have a lot of saturated fats. Now, you do need some fat. You don't need cholesterol, actually, because your liver, unless your liver has been destroyed through alcohol consumption or excessive sugar consumption, your liver produces cholesterol for you. So it meets your needs in terms of cholesterol. But so too much saturated fat has been associated with certain types of health problems, although there are people like Dr. Robert Lustig who will argue that it's not that it's something else. And, I'm not going to get into that because that's not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. All I can tell you is that there is a direct correlation and causation between dairy, which is high in saturated fat, and heart disease. Okay, so you want to try and get foods that are low in saturated fats, which is unfortunate because the best tasting dairy substitutes, fake milk, fake cheese, fake yogurt, fake ice cream, all that stuff is created using palm or dairy oil palm or coconut oil or coconut cream, which if you have to choose between one or the other, go for the one with the coconut cream, because at least coconut cream has some health benefits, whereas coconut oil, unless it's virgin coconut oil, has absolutely no redeeming qualities in it, and it carries lots of saturated fats. You'll notice that any product that has a lot of refined palm oil, including coconut, is going to have a lot of calories and a lot of saturated fat. So you want to try to look for the food that has low saturated fat, no trans fat. Now, this is a little bit tricky because, again, cooked ruminant meat, cow, goat, sheep, etc., animals that eat grass and stuff, that meat, when the fat is cooked, even when the fat is raw, has naturally got trans fats in it, and when you cook it, especially at high temperatures, you add more trans fats to it. So you're better off avoiding that, or at least trimming off the fat. So you want to look for unsaturated fats, poly and monounsaturated fats. Unfortunately, a lot of companies do not label poly and unsaturated fats, poly and monounsaturated fats. And in addition, the USDA, I think it is, does not require that the companies indicate amounts less than half a gram of saturated fat, trans fats, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, or anything else. So if it's less than half a gram, they're not required to list it. So if you find a company that's listing it, that's kind of a good indicator that this is a company that is a bit more ethical than the average company, or at least they're trying to be, or pretending to be, to get more attention from the health conscious public. So now, the next thing I want to talk to you about is fiber, which is another component of carbohydrates. 5 grams of fiber per day decreases your risk of cancer by 30%. Now, so if you increase the amount of fiber you have per day, you're going to have an even lower rate of cancer risk. You're also going to lower your rates of risk for a lot of other kinds of diseases. Now, that's fantastic, but you do need to have a balance of soluble and insoluble, because the insoluble stuff also helps to clean out your intestines. That's where roughage or greens comes into play. They definitely help with that.
Okay, so genetically.
Now, obviously, if you have a family history of cancer, you're at higher risk. But actually, the right kind of diet can decrease your risk by technically kind of turning off those genes after a period of time. Now, I don't know how long it takes or how much of the right kind of foods it takes, but there are studies that have demonstrated eating the right foods actually can do that. One more thing I wanted to point out is when you're looking at total carbs, subtract the fiber that's in the carbs to get the net carbs, because that fiber is not sugar in a sense that it's going to bother you, and it's actually going to counteract the sugars that are in the food. And that's one of the reasons why whole fruits are so good for your health and can actually reduce your risk of diabetes. Also, of course, try to look for foods that are have a low glycemic index and a low glycemic load. The glycemic load and glycemic index are related to each other because the load is derived from the index. But basically, the glycemic index tells how much sugar your bloodstream is going to be hit with. Okay, so you can look at it. If it says it's got a 60 for the glycemic index, that means that you're going to get a fairly fast or a fairly high spike of sugar. But if it's got a low glycemic index, even if it's a lot of sugar, that sugar is not going to really spike because it gets distributed. And one of the main ways that it gets distributed at a lower level over a longer period of time, which is what glycemic load indicates, is because of fiber. That's why juice is worse than apple juice, for example. So a whole fruit, even if it's all chopped up in little bitty things, is better for you than juices, even if they're not a concentrated sweetened juice. Okay? But if you ever find a food that has a low glycemic index, the load will also always be low. So that means that you're not getting very much sugar, and it's distributed into your bloodstream very, very slowly over a period of time, so you'll never have a blood sugar spike from that. Eat candy, eat chocolate, eat pancakes with waffles, or waffles with syrup, have a honey and peanut butter sandwich, whatever, or drink a soda. Those are all high glycemic index and high glycemic load foods. So you're going to get a big spike of sugar very quickly, and then your blood, as the insulin catches up and gets it all stored away, you're going to have a blood sugar crash, which is what makes you sleepy after that big Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I have mentioned more than once in here that you should be reducing or eliminating your intake of meat. Ideally, stick to seafood, but don't eat a lot of seafood because we are depleting the oceans far too rapidly. There are a lot of reasons not to eat meat, eggs, and dairy. Primarily among them are the massive impact that those three industries are having on our ecosystems, including the oceans. And I'm not even talking about seafood. And secondarily, because of the massive amount of damage we're causing to our health through the inhumane treatment of the animals, as well as the huge amount of suffering that animals often endure by many of these companies, because they treat them in very, very barbaric, primitive, horrific ways that I've seen some of it, and my son and I cried. And it's just, if you have any emotions, if you have any care for anything, oh my gosh, it's horrible. But now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Glenn, I've been told all my life that I need protein from, and I have to get it from animals. Well, guess what? That's a lie. Indirectly. So yes, eating animals gives you protein. Eggs gives you protein. Dairy gives you protein. But, here's the thing. The protein wasn't produced by those animals. The protein was produced by the plants that the animals ate. Yes, protein comes from plants, not from animals. So when you're eating animals, you're getting protein from plants. Now, you may think, but if I eat plants, I'm getting pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and other poisons. True. However, the concentration on those products is whatever was applied to that individual plant. Okay? It may be only on the surface, it may be in the inside, and that includes organic foods that are grown with organic pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. But when you eat an animal, you're getting concentrated levels of those poisons, especially the ones that bioaccumulate because your body can't throw them away, like arsenic and mercury. Your body can't just throw them away. Copper, gold, and other heavy metals, your body can't just detoxify them from them. So when you eat meat, including seafood, which also, by the way, things like shellfish, including shrimp and clams and oysters and stuff, and lobsters, that stuff is really, really high in cholesterol. So when you eat animals, you're getting concentrated levels of those poisons that are used to protect the crops from the pests that eat them, that destroy them. So guess what? Eating a bunch of fruits and vegetables gives you less poison than eating those animals. And of course, there are the negative effects of animals, and this has been proven for many, many decades. Some of the best athletes, in fact, the current world champion weightlifter, Patrick Baboumian, I think his name is, he's a vegan. Arnold Schwarzenegger went vegan and reversed his heart disease. One of the top marathoners, a lady, I forget her name, but she is a vegan. And the list goes on and on and on. So you don't actually need to eat animals to get your protein, and you can get more protein and better protein from plant sources. Next is B12. You've heard all your life you have to eat animals to get your B12. Well, guess what? B12 doesn't come from animals. Yes, you get it by eating the animals, but they didn't make it. They don't have the ability to synthesize it. Animals and us can synthesize D3, but we can't synthesize B12. B12 and some of the other B vitamins come from animals, but B12 is created by bacteria in the soil. So if you were to eat soil or drink spring water, you might get some B12. Unfortunately, because of our excessive use of gases that destroy all kinds of microbes in the soil, as well as pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, man-made fertilizers, we have destroyed the soil to the point that these bacteria cannot survive and produce B12. That means that ruminants that eat it, like cows and sheep and goats and stuff, are no longer getting B12 from the soil because the bacteria are all gone. And that means that a lot of ranchers, unless they're letting their cows graze on on fields that haven't been destroyed by such chemical usage, haven't got B12 and have to be injected. Now, there are ranchers who will lie to you and say, we don't use B12. Well, maybe they don't lie to you. Maybe they have one of those ranch situations where their cows are free to range and eat real grass and real soil. But if they're in a feedlot situation, which is the vast majority of cows these days, guess what? They don't get B12 from the soil or from the water. They get injected with it by farmers. If you don't believe it, look up B12 supplements for livestock. Yep. Okay, so I think I've covered everything that you really need to know. Stick as much as you can to fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, ideally, you want to go for the greens first. The greens are really, really good for your health. They have a lot of fiber that helps cleans out your intestines, which reduces the risk of polyps. It reduces the risk of diverticulitis and other ulcers and all kinds of things, and can help keep your dietary bacteria healthy, because there are bacteria in your guts that need fiber to live. Okay, have less carbohydrate heavy vegetables than the greens. Have less less. After that, you might want to have the ones like grains and carrots and stuff, and the ones that are high in carbs, like rice, like processed rice. If it's like whole rice, where only the outer hull that's inedible has been removed, that's great. But if it's a processed rice where they've removed the bran and the germ, that stuff is high glycemic index and high glycemic load, and you should be eating that stuff sparingly. Potatoes, avoid that, eating that on a regular basis. In addition, tapioca and anything else that's in a starch form or has a lot of starch in it should be eaten sparingly. Eat nuts every day, especially like walnuts are really good. Chia seeds are really good for you, and flaxseed. Flaxseed is also very good for you. Now, I don't recommend that you buy them in the milled form. I suggest that you mill them at home or crush them up in a mortar and pestle. The reason for that is when you mill them or get them pre-milled, they come into contact with air, and some of the stuff that's in that benefits you starts to oxidize, which means it's destroyed. Okay? Don't eat a lot of sugars. Don't eat a lot of salts. Don't eat a lot of oil. And yeah, that's and then of course get a good amount of fruits as well, and get a variety. It's always important to get a wide variety, especially stuff that's locally grown. If you can go to the farmer's market and pick it up there, that's probably going to be the best choice. And I understand that in some areas people have a hard time getting fresh produce. You need to put pressure on your local grocers to make sure that they're providing you with food that isn't going to kill you, like chips and junk food and fast food. So again, stick with the whole foods, reduce your intake of animal-based foods, and eliminate the processed foods so you can live longer, reduce your risk of dementia, Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, and so on. Reduce your risk of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, gout, urticaria, lupus, and so many other kinds of health problems. And if you go to your doctor and your doctor doesn't know about nutrition really, which is the majority of doctors, they prescribe medication because they don't know what else to tell you other than maybe the Mediterranean diet is going to be a good choice for you, or become a pescatarian. If you don't have a doctor who knows enough about nutrition, which most of them don't, then what you need to do is one of two things. You either need to have them refer you to a nutritionist, or switch doctors, quite frankly. And also remember, whether you are a vegan or a vegetarian or an omnivore or a carnivore, you need to get enough B12. Have your B12 checked every year. Make sure it's not low. Make sure you're getting sunlight in the early hours of the day and the late hours of the evening so that you're getting the D3 that your body produces naturally. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to the store and you're going to have to buy yourself some vitamin D. Make sure also, if you're a vegan, especially in addition to vitamin D, that you're getting calcium, magnesium, and zinc, and you're also getting vitamin C in case you're not getting enough of the fruits and vegetables that you need that provide vitamin C. And finally, of course, don't forget B12. Okay, can't say this enough. The best kinds are liquid, sublingual, or crystal, and make sure you're getting no less than 50 micrograms per day, or at least 2,000 micrograms per week. So you can do this on a daily basis or weekly basis. Some doctors, like Dr. Michael Greger, recommend as much as 5,000 per week. But it depends on a variety of factors, including your diet and also your age and any health conditions you may have. So consult with your doctor about that. And again, I am not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a dietitian, I am not a health expert. So everything I've said, you can take to your doctor, and probably should, and see what they think about what I'm telling you. If you've got a good doctor, they're going to agree with a large part of what I have told you. If they're a bad doctor, you might want to start looking around. If you're a pretty smart person, you're good at sussing out the truth from the fiction, and there's a lot of fiction out there, trust me, then you might want to do your own research like I did, and you will discover a long list of the good doctors and people out there who are trying to help, and the bad ones. Well, that's about it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and eat healthily. Have a great day.